World Trade Organization says hopes for a V-shaped recovery may be overly optimistic. The group's key trade barometer hit an all-time low as global trade fell sharply in the second quarter. The WTO said it is seeing some signs of a bounce back, but warned that the global economy could be facing a more protracted L-shaped recovery instead. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala says the WTO can play a critical role in helping economies bounce back from the pandemic. The former Nigeria finance minister is one of 8 candidates in the race to lead the organization, which has seen its influence wane as major economies like the US and China adopt more protectionist trade policies. Okonjo-Iweala told Stephanie Basari that in the post-pandemic era, the WTO could be more important than ever.
Trade can play an important part in the recovery from recession of the global economy. Many countries are going to be thrown into recession. They need to trade themselves, their ways out of this recession coming on. And so, again, the role of the WTO in making sure that the multilateral trading system is stable, predictable, fair, and can govern trade for every member. I think that's important. And I think this is one of the reasons why, this is my third point, why I have said or offered my leadership. I think that the WTO needs a leader at this time. It needs a fresh look, a fresh face, an outsider, someone with the capability to implement reforms and to work with members to make sure that the WTO comes out of the partial paralysis that it's in and moves to serve the world better.
So we're seeing a lot of countries kind of rejecting, if you like, the kind of global supply chain and focusing inwards on local production. And, post-pandemic, everyone's kind of like, we need to make these materials ourselves, we need to be self-sufficient. How does that impact global trade, for example, and what can the WTO do about that?
I think that this issue of protectionism and nationalism and trying to get supply chains back preceded the pandemic. There was a trend that had already started. And I think the pandemic has exacerbated it. So you will see a certain amount, I think, of reshoring, of bringing some supply chains back in countries. You have this sentiment of going from just in time to just in case or just at home, as some would term it. And so I think that's inevitable. But and I do not believe that the extent of this reshoring will be as large as many people think. I think McKinsey has estimated in some studies that maybe reshoring could reach up to 25% of global supply chains. And there'll still be a large part that continues because supply chains are so intricately woven now that it's not as easy to bring them back as one would think.
You talk about your work with COVID and a lot has been said about African countries and their resilience towards the pandemic, and the numbers just that have been predicted just haven't been seen here on the continent, bar maybe 6 or 7 countries that have been kind of badly hit. What is your assessment of the COVID situation in Africa?
Let us first say thanks to God that the number of deaths is fairly low, but I'm not sure we should be sanguine. According to the Africa CDC, Dr. John Nkengasong, the CDC is doing a very good job. Cases are accelerating at about 100,000 per week. So we're on the upward climb. We've not peaked yet in many countries. And we're at about 950,000 cases now. Almost getting to 1 million on the continent with about 20,000 deaths. So I don't think we can relax yet and say that this is passing us by. Let us see when we peak, when that will happen, and then we'll take it from there. You should also perhaps know that sometimes the symptoms of COVID resemble those of malaria, meningitis, and many other diseases on the continent. So we may also have some amount of underreporting of both cases and deaths.